support here tonight. And I must say that we'll be having a rather interesting event as it regards to something that has been controversial over the years. So we look forward to a wonderful presentation tonight. So ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to thank Subtway for hosting this amazing event, and I'm sure that we're all looking forward to enjoying the wonderful spread that is being prepared for us. But before we do that, I'd like to welcome up to the podium the head of the Westmoreland Hemp and Ganja Association, Mr. Ras Ivy, who will start with the blessing. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome him on the center stage.
Yes, first let me say greetings to everyone. Greetings in the name of His Imperial Majesty Haile Selassie. You'll find the Empress Matera Mene. I also want to greet you in the name of the Westmoreland Hemp and Ganja Farmers Association. An association that was set up because realizing what was happening over the years and what more so over the past months in America, we knew the time had come, sooner or later, that the government of Jamaica would have to decriminalize and legalize. But I also know that the rights of the people who have borne the persecution, who have made the sacrifice, the Rastafari community and the grassroots people, could be in danger if those rights are not protected. And for that reason, we set up the Westmoreland Hemp and Ganja Farmers Association. I give thanks to be here tonight because normally or historically I am a Rastafari. We are not found or seen among certain type of settings. But where ganja is concerned, it's an issue or it's a subject matter that concerns almost everybody who lives in Jamaica. Because I know that a lot of things that happen, a lot of economic growth that has taken place in Jamaica is due to ganja. Whether we want to accept it or not, but that's a reality. Now, I give thanks that the government has taken an approach that they intend to legalize or decriminalize with a regulated framework. And I give thanks for that because years upon years we have been agitating. We have been writing to government. We have been marching. And it's as if ganja was an issue, was so stigmatized that even some of the very people who were involved in ganja business did not want to be publicly associated with ganja. Today we realize the economic potential of ganja, and we give thanks that an active yes, I really want to give thanks that people of all walks of life, of all strata, are getting together in order to defend a product that we have here in Jamaica that is internationally recognized and that can be utilized to uplift the economy of Jamaica and hence the standard of living of our people. I think we here tonight should not leave here without sending a message to the powers that be. What is it that we would like to see become of Jamaica where ganja is concerned? it is not beyond us to design a regulatory framework where everybody can benefit. The hoteliers can benefit, the taximan can benefit, the restaurant people can benefit, and the ganja farmers can benefit. So tonight, again, I say I give thanks for everyone gathered here, and hoping that our time will be well spent. Those who don't know about ganja will learn. I want to give thanks for the guest speaker being here. But I hope that in leaving here, we will feel satisfied that we came together as a people and develop a program that will be given some form of recognition by the government, that we can feel satisfied that our time was not spent in vain. So again, I say, give thanks to be here.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was head of the Westland Hemp and Ganja Association. Thank you so much for sharing your insight, and we hope that we will move forward as it regards to legalizing, and with legalizing, we'll have a better environment as it regards to success. Oh, I like what you said right there, okay. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you know, it's all about great company, and of course, once again, welcome to everyone. I see quite a few people hedonism over here. We see quite a few people here tonight. So, ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for great support, ladies and gentlemen. Come on, round of applause. The Negril Chamber of Commerce making strides to keep Negril on top. Alright, so ladies and gentlemen, we have a wonderful, wonderful buffet, and we invite everyone to just partake of, I'm sure it's going to be amazing, because subtly I've been here before, believe me, I have always been impressed. So ladies and gentlemen, the buffet line is now officially open. Now, ladies and gentlemen, acknowledge the chefs tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for the chefs. You did a wonderful job. They have, oh my goodness, let me tell you something. I walked in and everything was just amazing. The service from Subtle, ladies and gentlemen. All the waitresses, the bartenders did a wonderful job tonight, ladies and gentlemen.
Hey, you did last year, right? Yeah, right. I remember that. Nice to see you. You're back again.
This is a very, very special moment right now, because for those who obviously have been in the grill for quite a long time, they will remember this amazing personality. And just recently we heard the news that this gentleman has passed on to a spiritual plane. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to invite everyone right now to just observe a moment of silence for Matthew Bazooka. A moment of silence, please. A moment of silence for Matthew Bazooka. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Now from this video, you have moved on. May your soul rest in peace and light perpetually shine upon you. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to officially start the second segment of our proceedings tonight. And I would like to introduce to you right now the President of the Negril Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Ray Office. A round of applause, please.
This is Master of Ceremony, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed a pleasure. It is a privilege, and with great pride, I stand here this evening to give you a bird's eye view, a cameo of the activities of the Negril Chamber of Commerce over the last 34 years. I said it is a privilege because 34 years ago, I sat with a few men and women who had a vision. They had the tenacity, they had the will to carry forward under all circumstances of life, to chart the path of the Negril Chamber of Commerce. In charting that path, there were many obstacles, many difficulties. And that is where the word tenacity comes in, because under all circumstances, they held tight, constant. It wasn't very long after we started the Negril Chamber of Commerce that we became very aware that just going out and advertising for your rooms was not enough. We had to create an environment in which the industry could flourish. And so most of the time of the Negril Chamber of Commerce was taken up, instead of pursuing commerce, we created the environment so that commerce could flourish. We started out on this path, and shortly after we started out, we realized that there were many hurdles to climb. With the environment foremost in our minds, we had a sewage plant in Negril that was emanating a perfume that welcomed the guests into Negril and also the workers who had worked there. And although we had many consultations, many talks, nothing happened, to the point where we were forced to take that organization to court, a giant organization in Jamaica. We had problems even finding a lawyer who would be prepared to take the case. Finally, one came forward, and we won the case. That's his vantage no more. Shortly thereafter, there was an ill-conceived idea from the government to mine peat for Negril. Ill-conceived idea. It was never thought through. The output, the lifespan of the project, and the return didn't seem to make sense to us. But that wasn't really our problem. Our problem was that after the mining of the peat was finished, there was going to be a mosaic of lakes and backup the sandbar that is called the Negril Sands. And in front, the Caribbean Sea. And the thought was frightening. If there was a hurricane, two great body of waters, one behind and one before, with a narrow sandbank, less than a quarter mile across in many places. The thought was frightening. And so we fought the government. We get help, local help, national help, international help. Scientists from all over came and told us it's not going to work, and we fought it. I want to say at this juncture, but at that time, the Negril Chamber of Commerce, the only private organization in the world, was a member of IUCN, International Union Conservation of Nature. And those people will rally behind us time and time again. And the gentleman who was at the head of that organization, he became a friend of Negril. Many times backward and forward. And tonight I feel so good because that gentleman is here, Mr. Bobby and his wife. We fought and we won. A rare achievement to fight the governmental wing. Today the heat is still there, doing the duty that Almighty God put it here to do. And so the fight went on, but we want to change the tone somewhat, because we like to, not so much the fight, but we want to take the mantle of always going forward and lobbying, and we take on a more lobbying approach. We lobby for the sewage plant, again a very great environmental hazard that was going to develop in Negril. And because these people have foresight, they realized that there was going to be danger. And for 5 years we lobbied the government, and we were told all sorts of things. Negril getting a central sewage plant, you guys are too ambitious. And we fought, or shall I say lobby, and we lobbied for 5 years until finally the money was granted for the sewage plant, the central sewage. We wanted a tertiary system. We didn't get that, but we have the sewage plant. Achievement of the Negril Chamber of Commerce. We unite with the UDC to build a craft market for the people on the streets of Rotterdam. And no sooner that was finished, more people came on the street again. Again we worked with UDC to create the craft market in the center of the town. Not a good sight, but the people was off the street. They are not harassed by the police anymore. And again more come onto the streets. This time the Chamber of Commerce united with USA. And we built a plaza called Philly Plaza. And we built 54 shops. That small people can have a place to sell their goods at a very cheap rate. To this day, 20 years later, the rent is hard to move. It's hard to beat that. I tell you. And so on and on, we plot. Police station. The place where the police met was a disgrace. We had to take pictures, take it to Kingston, and show the commissioner and the minister. They said, what is that? He says, Minister, have a look. Have a look. Today we have one of the finest police stations in the island. And I could go on and on and on, but I was told to make it brief. I don't want to bore you. But I could go on for an hour or two. But I just want to mention, just by way of mention, things that the Chamber has accomplished. The library, car park, schools. We adopt 3 schools, 2 in Lucy, 2 in Hanover, 1 in Westwater. We put solar lights on the beach for the tourists so they could walk at nights. And we recycling center. We have a huge establishment there. This recycling center was put there for the purpose of collecting all the garbage. Bottles, glass bottles, plastic bottles, cardboards, package them and sent to Kingston. It was not a very financially liable project, but what we were doing was removing the garbage from the streets. That was the purpose. If the byproduct had brought some money in, that was good, but the main purpose, garbage off the street. 30 years ago, we were doing that. And today, one of the things that the Chamber vow for is to remove garbage from the street. We've talked about many things that we have done. What I want to tell you about is what we want to do. We have vowed to remove garbage from the street in Negril. We vow to make sure that our health center is a place that our locals and our tourists can go there and have the service which they deserve if it's seen for 24 hours a day. Hence, this dinner collect funds to do that sort of thing. The recycling center that the Chamber has stands there now idle. Thousands and thousands of square feet of building there in very good condition. And this is a challenge. We would perhaps like to do partnership with anyone who wants to talk to us about this recycling center. There's a building there that costs millions and millions of dollars. Sit there idling. Because we want partners with the energy and the know-how to make sure that this plan can go forward. One of the things we want to achieve, Chamber of Commerce, with your help and with the blessing of Almighty God, to make sure that Norman Washington Manley vision becomes a reality. He came to Negril and he saw the sand beach, the snow white sand beach. And he saw the crystal clear waters, not the villa, and he saw the tranquil landscape, and he declared, one day, Negril is going to become the mecca for tourism in Jamaica. And we in the Chamber of Commerce would like to make sure that we can do that with your help. Negril has potential, great potential, but because our feet and our arms are often tied, bureaucracy and red tape, we can't move. We wish the day will come when through our lobbying, and those with good sense will see that because of our accomplishment, and we have know-how. And when we have got the know-how, we know where to go look for it. We have small projects going on in Negril, like a park, and we have no say in it. We have boulders that are put into the sea to prevent erosion, and we have no say in it. Now, if we have done all that, and we are the leaders in all the projects in Negril, why not give us a chance to go forward and to create the Negril that we want, instead of those from outside telling us what we must have.
Hear, hear.
We live here, we do our business here, and so we should know what we want.
Hear, hear.
With your help and with your blessing, one day we want to make Norman Washington Manley's vision becomes a reality. Thank you for coming, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you so much, Mr. Authors. As he says, we live here, we work here, and we must support the Chamber of Commerce because the ambitions are real, and we believe that Negril can be the mecca of tourism here in Jamaica and the Caribbean. So ladies and gentlemen, support the Chamber of Commerce and all my stakeholders. Let's keep it real. Let's keep Negril alive. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome the Mayor of Kingston and the PNP Vice President, Her Worship, Senator Angela Brown-Burke. A round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. The PNP General Secretary and Program Director of the Cannabis Commercial and Medicinal Research Task Force, Mr. Paul Burke. The JLP MPK Taker Advisor to the Opposition and Director of the Cannabis Commercial and Medicinal Research Task Force, Mr. Delana Servat. A special welcome to Wanda James and Scott Durant, the pronunciation right? Cannabis Global Institute from Gala. Mr. Tony Newman and Malik Burnett. Paul Burke and his wonderful wife, they're here tonight. Members of the Drug Policy Alliance, welcome them, ladies and gentlemen. Now, ladies and gentlemen, 20 years ago, if someone told us that we could take a photo without a film, read the news or update ourselves on current affairs, send a message to someone around the world, watch a favorite game, or call a friend with a gadget in the palm of your hands. Look no further, ladies and gentlemen. We're talking about possibilities. And with this being said, the key word is possibility. And just to highlight a few excerpts from various news briefings or bulletins, Minister Peter Bunting announced that cops can no longer arrest people for possession of a small amount of ganja, but instead serve them with summons. The government has approved proposals for amendments to the Dangerous Drug Act as it moves to establish medical ganja and industrial hemp industries, where the cultivation and other activities involved in the production and supply of the plant will be legal under a controlled regime. Another quotation. After years of advocating for the legalization of marijuana by weed smokers, herbalists, groups and movements, and countless others, supporters will take a big step to a great initiative. Ladies and gentlemen, it comes down to possibilities, and tonight we have the privilege of being host to a gentleman who has become a full-time advocate for ending the drug war and bringing to the forefront the positive of something that has been a topic of controversy, especially in our Jamaican culture. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome Ms. Sophie Grizzle, who will introduce the man of the moment. Ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Sophie.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I've also been asked by Ethan to make this very quick. I don't think he wants me to give away any of his tricks. So Ethan Avram Nadelman was born in 1957 in New York City. His father was a rabbi and he was raised in New York until he attended Harvard University in 1977, where he earned his BA, JD, and PhD degrees. He then went on to the London School of Economics, where he did a master's degree in international relations. In 1987, he became a professor, leading advocate, criminologist, and political scientist at Princeton University's Woodrow Wilson School of International and Public Affairs. While at Princeton, he lectured and wrote extensively on drug policy, attracting considerable attention with his articles in such periodicals as Science and Foreign Affairs. In '94, Ethan left his teaching position at Princeton University to become a full-time advocate for ending the drug war. With the philanthropic support of George Soros, he founded the Drug Policy Alliance, a New York-based non-profit organization. It is the largest and most influential organization promoting drug policies grounded in science, compassion, health, and human rights. Ethan takes a public health rather than a criminal justice approach to the war on drugs. His vision and leadership have had a monumental impact on public opinion and changed the course of history. He has worked closely with the Global Commission on Drug Policy, whose members include global leaders and luminaries like Sir Richard Branson and Kofi Annan. He's worked hard to break the taboo on public discussion of non-prohibitionist drug policies. Ethan has published 2 books and was a star in a documentary film called How Weed Won the West. The ideas he presents are provocative, enlightening, and becoming more mainstream than anyone could have imagined when he began his activism more than 2 decades ago. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Ethan Nadelman.
Just one? Yeah. It's this one. Can you hear me in the back? Yeah. Okay, I'm going to talk until you all start talking. That's when I'll know when to stop. So, thank you for having me here in Negril. It's fantastic to see such a wonderfully large audience. I was told that nobody really recognizes anyone because so many men are dressed in suits for the first time in many years. True? I don't know. I apologize, I did not wear one seeing everybody dressed up this way. But let me just dive into this. The work I do is about rolling back the drug war, ending the drug war. That's what I do. That's what I've been spending decades doing, and that's what I'm going to spend decades more doing. Most of my struggle is in my own country, the United States. But I first and foremost regard myself as a human rights activist. Somebody who works to advance human rights and freedom and social justice around the world. And who happens to focus this human rights struggle at ending the war on drugs. This global war on drugs, not just with ganja, but across the board, that has devastated countries around the world, the violence in Mexico and Colombia and West Africa, Afghanistan, and my own country as well. The millions of people incarcerated in my country and elsewhere, the violations of civil liberties and human rights. People dying of HIV and hepatitis and overdoses because governments choose to treat drugs, first and foremost, as a criminal problem rather than a health issue. It seems to me that rolling back and ending this struggle is a monumental challenge for the 21st century. And that Jamaica, I believe, has a special role to play in all of this. Now, what I want to do this evening is to talk about partially what's happening in my country, partially what's happening in Jamaica, and partially what's happening around the world. And I'm going to ask your forgiveness in advance, because I am going to speak frankly. If I say things about Jamaica or Jamaicans that sound bigoted or dumb or naive or whatever, let me apologize in advance. Give me that space, because part of what I'm doing is, what I know about Jamaica is what I have mostly learned from speaking to people here. And if I speak frankly in the ways that people in Jamaica speak about Jamaica, and your own fears and frustrations about what's going on in this country, and your own and all of that, then just give me that room to just speak frankly as a fellow human being, not as an American coming down here, you know, to tell you what to do. Because I don't know what you ultimately have to do. I'm going to tell you what we're doing in the U.S. I'm going to give you some thoughts about how you deal with the things in front of you, and you all got to figure it out. I'm going to tell you what it might look like, and I'm going to tell you the issues you might have to worry about. But it's up to you to move this thing forward. I think, well, let me just start this. How many people in this room believe that we should end the criminalization of ganja and legalize it? Just raise your hands, please. How many of you, put your hands down, how many of you think we should not do that? Raise your hands. How many of you are not sure? Raise your hands. How many of you don't want to say what you think? Raise your hands. Okay. So I have some sense of this. Now, when you look at what's going on in the United States, and you look at the change, right now, almost half the states in the United States have legalized. I'm going to ask you all to please quiet. As a professor, I do expect quiet, please. Thank you. I'll try to keep you focused up here. Half the United States, the states of the United States, now have marijuana legal for medical purposes. Millions of Americans now are legal medical marijuana patients who can get marijuana legally with a recommendation from a doctor. There are now thousands of legal dispensaries, shops, stores selling marijuana legally above ground, being regulated by state and local authorities. Tens, perhaps hundreds of millions of dollars are now being paid in tax revenue just on medical marijuana. 70% of my fellow Americans now believe that marijuana should be legal for medical purposes. The Obama administration has allowed this now to proceed in a very cautious way that I will explain briefly. In addition, if you feel the need to talk, just please step outside. In addition, a majority of Americans now believe that marijuana should be legal more broadly for adults. They believe it should be controlled, taxed, and regulated like alcohol. 4 states, Washington and Colorado 2 years ago, now Oregon and Alaska just recently, voted to legally tax and regulate marijuana. And Washington, D.C. voted to decriminalize it with a broad decriminalization, and the issue about whether or not Congress will allow that decriminalization in D.C. to proceed became a dominant issue in American politics just this week, when the Republican-dominated House of Representatives said that they would not respect the vote of 70% of Washington, D.C. voters to basically legalize marijuana, to legalize the possession of marijuana. We have made real progress, and I'm proud to say that a lot of the work that has happened in the United States is because of the work of my colleagues and I at the Drug Policy Alliance. We are not the only ones doing this, but that's what we do. That's what we do. At the same time we're out there, we're taking on the broader war on drugs. The United States, we have less than 5% of the world's population, but almost 25% of the world's incarcerated population. We have the highest per capita incarceration rate in the world. We lock up more people for drug law violations than all of Western Europe locks up for everything. And they have 100 million more people than we do. And when you look at the element of racism and racial disproportionality in the war on drugs in my country, it makes you sick. It makes you sick. The rate of incarceration of African Americans in my country exceeds the rate of incarceration in the Soviet gulags of the 30s, 40s, and 50s. It makes the rates of incarceration in apartheid South Africa look tame by comparison. If you look at the origins of the drug laws in my country and many others, does anybody actually think that the way we landed up with the criminalization of ganja in my country, or even the other drugs, had to do with a distinguished group of scientists being gathered together 100 years ago and evaluating like which drugs were the most dangerous and which were not, and by scientific standards ruling that alcohol and tobacco were okay and marijuana, cocaine? Anybody believe that? No, this didn't happen. You know why some drugs are illegal and others not? It has almost nothing to do with the relative risks or dangers of drugs, and almost everything to do with who uses and who's perceived to use particular drugs. That's what drives it. In the late 19th century, most consumers of opiates were middle-aged white women, using it for aches, their aches and pains, because they didn't have aspirin, they didn't have those, they didn't have anything going for menopause, they didn't have anything to deal with diarrhea and bad sanitation and all that. And you know how? Nobody wanted to put them in jail because nobody wanted to put their grandmother auntie behind bars. But when the Chinese started coming to America, working hard on the railroads and in the mines and kicking back in the evening with the opium pipe just like they had in that old country, just like other Americans were kicking back with a drink in the evening, that's when you saw the first criminalizations of opium in America. In Nevada and California, directed at Chinese minorities and driven by the fears of what those Chinamen were going to do to our precious white women, transforming them into drug-addicted sex slaves. The first cocaine prohibition laws, until the late 19th century, Coca-Cola had cocaine in it. And so far as we know, it was no more dangerous back then than Coca-Cola is with caffeine today. Right? But when in New Orleans, in the early part of the 20th century, the word went out that black men were sniffing that white powder up their black noses and forgetting their proper place in society. That's where you saw the first criminalizations and the first race baiting and racism driving the criminalization of drugs. The first criminalizations of marijuana in the Southwest and the West of the United States, beginning in the 19-teens through the 30s, driven by fears and prejudice against Mexican Americans and Mexican migrants, bringing up that tradition from Mexico, marijuana, cucaracha. That was what they were doing. And once again, the fear of people whose skins were darker driving it. I mean, quite frankly, even our own battle in America about alcohol prohibition was to some extent a cultural struggle between the white Americans and the not-so-white Americans, right? Between the white Americans who came from Northern and Western Europe in the late 17th, early 18th century, and early 19th century, and the not-so-white Americans coming from Eastern Europe and Southern Europe in the late 19th and early 20th century, bringing with them their beer and vino and their, all the other things that people hadn't heard of at that time. It's always about that. It's about who uses and who is perceived to use. Look in this society here. To what extent was the association of ganja with the Rastafarians part of what drove this harsh criminalization in this country? When I look at other parts around the world, once again, it is about that stigma and the prejudice. And oftentimes the lighter-skinned elites looking down their noses at the darker-skinned, whether it's the campesinos or peasants or farmers or minorities or whatever it might be. And there is no reason for that prejudice to somehow get legitimized by the pretense of science. And when law enforcement is out there, mindless of the origins of these laws, blindly enforcing these laws, without knowing the origins of the laws that they enforce, and indifferent to the origins. When ministers are out there saying, we have to keep ganja criminalized in this country. Why? Why? It's not in the Bible. It's not in the Bible. I don't find any "you must" that ganja is prohibited. I don't see any prohibition of ganja in the Bible. I don't know where that prohibition comes from. Right? These are prejudices that have been built into our psyches, our culture, and our laws, and that need to be uprooted so that we can move forward to a freer and more rational society. And the next thing I'll tell you is this. In the United States, 10 years ago, barely a third of Americans thought that marijuana should be legally taxed and regulated like alcohol. And today it's more like 53% a majority. Change, in fact, can happen. It's happened remarkably quickly in my country. I don't know what the public opinion polls are in Jamaica, but I do know that this stuff can move quickly. I know that what caused it to change in part was political action. It was people who cared about this and wanted to change this thing, saying enough was enough. It was people realizing that marijuana prohibition does nothing to protect young people. Absolutely nothing. When young people hear adults saying, oh, well, we need to keep marijuana legal to protect you youngsters, young people go, what the hell have you been smoking? Because that is not a rational line of argument. In my country, and I bet in yours as well, teenagers say it is easier to obtain, easier to buy marijuana than it is to buy alcohol. Right? If you ask who has got the best access to marijuana in my country right now, it's teenagers. Who had the best access 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago? Teenagers. Who's going to have the best access 10, 20, 30 years from now, whether we legalize it for adults or not? Teenagers. And I bet the same thing is true right here. So this pretending, adults pretending, we got to keep our kids safe. Come on already. Cut it out. At some point, young people want honesty from adults. They want to see mature behavior and mature thinking, mature policy from adults. That's, I think, what they want. Policy can shift. You know, it can shift. It can shift. I'm looking around the world now, and there's now a global commission on drug policy with former presidents of Colombia and Brazil and Mexico and Chile and Switzerland and a host of other countries, with the former secretary of actually almost everything, George Shultz, and the former head of the Federal Reserve, Paul Volcker, with Richard Branson, with the former UN Secretary General Kofi Annan, on this global commission on drug policy, saying the war on drugs has failed and had devastating effects around the world, and we need to move in a fundamentally different direction with marijuana and with the other substances as well, even if the solution with the other substances is not the same as it is with marijuana. Let me tell you about Jamaica for a moment, for me, from my perspective. I first came to Jamaica almost 30 years ago. I was writing my PhD dissertation at Harvard on international crime and law enforcement. I had gotten grants. I was interviewing drug enforcement agents all around South America and Europe, and customs agents, FBI agents, diplomats, local law enforcement, and I was starting a 7-country trip that took me to Jamaica, Panama, Ecuador, Peru, Chile, Bolivia, and Argentina. 30 days, interviewing everywhere I went. I start off in Jamaica. The first day I go into the U.S. Embassy, I interview the DEA guys, as I did in many countries. Then I go over and I interview the deputy head of the narcotics offices, and you could see their job was to go and bust people and find criminal organizations involved in ganja. And I was staying in a guest house near the University of West Indies, and that evening I went out and smoked some really fine ganja with a Jamaican fellow I was hanging out with. And, you know, the juxtaposition of the two just kind of stuck with me. 2 years later, I was finishing my dissertation. I had recently gotten married. A few months later, my father had died suddenly at a young age. I was trying to finish my dissertation, and I was needing a break. And my wife at the time, we came down to Negril. And we spent 10 days in Negril. The most wonderful vacation we ever had. We stayed at a little place called Our Pastime down on the beach. And 10 days, just enjoying walking the beach, smoking ganja every day. You know, the way we got it, actually, we didn't even go across the street. What it was you walk down the beach when you arrived, you bump into some other American or Canadian tourists who were leaving, they would hand off their ganja, you know, and then when you left, you'd hand off your ganja, and in between, if you stayed long enough, you would have befriended the guys on the beach who were giving you the stuff. So, I mean, so that was Jamaica, and it was a wonderful, and it just left a sweet feeling about Negril for me. I didn't come back for a long time. And then 10 years ago, I came down, somewhat And just, it was then the Parliament was considering the Siobhan Commission. I don't know how many remember the Siobhan Marijuana Decriminalization Commission. This local activist, Paul Chang, I met Paul Burke at that time. We went over and did interviews at the Gleaner, and we met with some of the members of Parliament. We did some radio shows, but nothing much was happening because, well, everybody was afraid of what the U.S. government would do, right? Obviously afraid of what they would do. And that was, 2004 or so. That was, George Bush, and the drug czar was a nutcase, and it was terrible. I didn't come back, and then 5 years ago, I get a phone call from Chris Blackwell. And I met Chris in New York about 10 years ago. We hit it off and then lost touch. And he calls me up 5 years ago. And he says, Ethan, you gotta come down, right? Right, what? Well, I just talked to the Prime Minister, Bruce Golding, and he says he's ready to support an effort to legalize ganja. I said, really? Yeah, that's what he said. He's not saying it publicly, but that's what he said. I'm saying it publicly now. So I fly down, Chris flies me down, I go to his place, and he's got his, rock star friends, Jimmy Buffett and others, and a whole host of Jamaican politicians. And then we fly in Jimmy Buffett's plane over the mountains to Kingston, go over to Jamaica House where we're supposed to meet with the Prime Minister, who unfortunately is off in Trinidad selling the national airline, so he couldn't be there. But we meet with his aides, Chris Zaka and Darryl Voss, and we have a discussion, and I say to them, listen, let me tell you something here. Do not talk about legalizing marijuana. I mean, this was the first year Obama administration. Do not talk about that. But you can start talking about the Siobhan Commission. You can talk about legalizing for medical purposes, right? You can talk about legalizing the religious rights of the Rastafarians. You can talk about no longer arresting people for ganja. Am I talking too fast, or is this okay? Okay, because I'm a New Yorker, you know how it is. Right? And you can maybe start to tiptoe your way into a kind of a coffee shop sort of system, like the Dutch have, and see if maybe, but don't talk about legalization, right? And people were kind of thinking about it, but then that whole thing was going down with due to Coke, right? The whole extradition of Coke, the guy, and all that stuff, and you all know what I'm talking about, right? And that nobody wanted to move forward on that issue back then. It just died again, right? I did have the good fortune of meeting an up-and-coming young politician, though, who was heading the Youth Division JLP, Gala. Last year, I come down to Kingston, and Delano and Paul Burke and an activist here, Paul Chang, have arranged a whole series of meetings. We meet with the Gleaner, we meet with others, and then, I gotta tell you, this was one of the most, you can hear me in the back? Go to this afternoon meeting, we turn over a hotel or something. And I walk in, and Paul's there, and I meet his wife, Angela Brown Burke, and there's Delano, and there's the heads of the youth divisions of both parties, the JLP and the PNP. And there are four former cabinet ministers from the JLP and other leadership from the PNP. And we start having this very lively conversation about ganja law reform. Should it start on decrim? Should it start on the religious? Should it start on the medical? Should we go to full legalization? Blah, 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 blah. And they're going back and forth, and somebody from the JLP is saying to the PNP, why don't you introduce that? And somebody's going, why don't you do that? And all of a sudden, there's this pause. And the elected officials, the politicians, look across the table at one another, and they go, oh my God, it brought ganja. It took ganja to bring us together and work in a bipartisan way. Jamaica, but Jamaica is changing. Things are happening. And then I drove up here to Negril and had a nice luncheon with some members of the Chamber of Commerce. About a dozen people who are here tonight. Just started talking and thinking about what might be done. But one of the things that stuck in my mind, this was August of last year, was one of the ministers says to me, Ethan, you don't understand. You're telling me you have to change it? No. Just a few years ago, when we all were thinking of just reducing the penalties for ganja possession, all of a sudden my phone rings. It's the U.S. ambassador. The next thing I know, I'm on a conference call with the drug czar and everybody else explaining to me all the harms of ganja and why the U.S. government would strongly prefer that Jamaica not move forward with this step. And are you telling me that's not going to happen anymore? You tell me the U.S. government's not going to be screwing us with our IMF stuff and our World Bank stuff and this and the Caribbean and all this stuff? Please do keep it down. And I said, things are changing in the U.S. Keep your eye on what's happening in the U.S. I have spent decades traveling around the world starting my speeches by apologizing for the incredible harm wreaked by my government all around the world with our disastrous war on drugs. And I still do that. But I'm now proud to say that the United States of America is leading the world when it comes to the reform of ganja laws. We are leading, not at the level of national government, but we are leading the way in terms of civil society and public opinion and state and local government. Others are, the Dutch, who had always led the way on ganja reform, cannabis with their coffee shops, all of a sudden they're going, whoa! The U.S., they just leapfrogged us. All of a sudden the Europeans who are sitting complacently saying, well, we have a very responsible, mature public health policy, and they're seeing the United States is actually driving forward. Even as we're waging our global drug war, we're changing over here. We're changing over here. And I said, keep your eye on things, because at this point, the U.S., it really is. And they're like, I don't know. And I realized, and excuse me for putting it this way, but I realized that for Jamaica and for the other countries in the Caribbean and Latin America, never mind much the rest of the world, that the relationship with the U.S. has been in a way one of being so bullied for so long, that the relationship almost seems to me, as an American who fights against my own government, like the relationship of an abusive parent to an abused child. And that, even when the abusive parent is lying on their deathbed, paralyzed, and their previously abused children come to be there, there's still that little fear that somehow the abusive parent will rear out of its deathbed at the last minute to smack the kid again, right? And I think that fear persists, especially in the Caribbean. Especially in the Caribbean. Well, the very next day, the Justice Department, the White House, announced that they were going to give Colorado and Washington a green light, a qualified green light to implement their taxation and legal regulation of marijuana. The very next day, I remember being on that crazy road from Kingston to here with my crazy friend driving at 98 miles an hour, right, doing interviews with American media on that program, on that issue. Right? What's happened now, and you have to understand it, what's so significant, anybody who says today that Jamaica cannot move forward with ganja law reform because of what the U.S. will do, that's not true anymore. And here's why. When the United States, when the Obama administration, Attorney General Holder, when they issued that memorandum, that Cole memorandum in August of last year, and they said, we are going to give Colorado and Washington the ability to move, even though this technically violates federal law, and here are the 7 conditions you have to meet, but where they actually intimated that perhaps the regulation and taxation of marijuana might better accomplish the health and safety objectives of federal drug control than persisting with a failed prohibitionist policy, that was monumental. I'm not going to say that President Obama provided bold leadership on this issue, but he provided leadership. After being such a disappointment on these issues in his first term, he and the Attorney General Holder are providing leadership on this issue and on the issue of addressing mass incarceration in my country. And when they gave that qualified green light to Washington, Colorado to proceed, you know what? They had to afford the same courtesy to other countries. So in December, when the little country of Uruguay voted to legalize marijuana and tax and regulate it, become the first national government to do so, the U.S. ambassador in Uruguay said, both privately at her meetings down there and publicly, that the United States no longer regards the reform of marijuana laws as an issue of U.S. national interest. That provided it does not result in an increase of exports of marijuana to the U.S., so provided it does not create security issues for the region, and provided you don't start talking about legalizing other drugs, the U.S. government regards it as a domestic matter. A domestic matter. What that means is that your government has every right and in fact every obligation to say to my government, we demand the same courtesy as you've given Uruguay. We demand it as a sovereign nation. Right? It's pivotal. And the U.S. government will acknowledge that right. They will acknowledge that right. Very significantly, just last month, the Assistant Secretary of State for Narcotics, William Brownfield, a very respected, kind of tough diplomat, former ambassador to Colombia and Venezuela, been identified with a kind of punitive approach to drugs. He gives this speech. Now, mind you, he wasn't looking for a lot of attention to this speech, but I'm giving it a lot of attention. Because what he said is the United States government now has a new global drug policy based upon 4 pillars. The first pillar is respect the international conventions. The 4th pillar is cooperate on cracking down on organized crime. Okay. The second provision is the United States government now supports a flexible interpretation of the international drug control conventions. And the third provision is the United States government now favors a policy of tolerance towards diverse approaches toward drug control. This represents a break with 100 years of the U.S. global war on drugs. And when Brownfield, the State Department rep, said the U.S. government now supports a flexible interpretation of the conventions, in part, he had no choice but to say that. Because one can argue that what Colorado and Washington are doing are technically in violation of the international conventions and what Uruguay is doing. But the bottom line is that those international drug conventions are supposed to be about advancing safety and health in the area of drug control. And if legalizing and regulating in a responsible way ganja in this country advances the objectives of safety and health, then so be it. It is consistent with the objectives of international drug control. And when you then take those international drug control conventions and you line them up on the human rights conventions and the public health conventions and the development conventions, you know what? You find that some of the provisions of those international drug control conventions are in violation and conflict with the human rights and health and development treaties. And who ever said that the drug control conventions automatically can trump global conventions on health, development, and human rights? I'm saying all this because I hear people in your government right now saying they can't move forward because of those international drug conventions. But you know something? When Colorado, Washington, Oregon, and Alaska and D.C. can move forward, and when the Obama administration give them a green light to move forward, and when they can now be making efforts to facilitate the efforts to do that, and when Uruguay can move forward in that way, you know what? Jamaica can too. And the next time you hear a politician say that, you tell them that. Now, when I was down in Kingston last year, people were talking somewhat boastfully. Yeah, man. Our Sensimilla, our ganja here, our Sensimilla, we're world famous. We just legalized this stuff and, we're going to dominate the global market. And I had to introduce some somewhat bad news, which is that my generation still thinks highly of Jamaican Sensimilla ganja. And you still got a lot of tourists coming down here because they want to smoke some of that stuff and be in a chill place to do it. But the younger generation, what's it called? Purple Haze and Diesel Weasel and everything else. You know what else? Consumer tastes have shifted from outdoor grow, which is mostly what you do in Jamaica, to indoor grow. To stuff with all these nice little crystals and buds and all this potent different smell. And the world of ganja reform has moved forward rapidly. You know what I said? If you guys in Jamaica don't get your act together soon, you're going to be importing ganja from America. And a few months later, Quiet, please. Quiet, please. A few months later, Sir Richard Branson had a little meeting of Caribbean leaders on his island, Mosquito Island in the Caribbean, mostly about climate change and all that, but he took the second afternoon to focus on the issue of ending the drug war. And there were ministers, prime ministers, business leaders, chamber of commerce people from around the Caribbean. You know? And I basically gave them the same message. You know, the prime minister of St. Vincent Grenadine, Ralph Gonzalez, was trying to move this forward. But it's better start moving. It better start moving because the world could pass Jamaica behind. You know, there's now a bill that people have introduced. There's bipartisan support down in Kingston for a bill to decriminalize marijuana and allow it on medical and religious. But it seems to me that it's moving forward on what people call Jamaica time. You take two, you know, at some point, Jamaica time becomes out of time. You want this to happen, it's got to happen now, it's got to move forward. I know that the nations of the Caribbean are not used to providing regional or global leadership, but it's got to move forward quickly, and it's got to move forward with collective action in this country if something's going to happen. Because I kid you not, let me tell you what's going on in the United States right now. I used to not pay attention to the marijuana industry. I'm in this for civil liberties and civil rights. That's what drives me. Good public policy, that's what I'm looking at. I'm not interested in the industry and the potential and all that. I'm interested, but it's not what drives me, right? A few weeks ago, I went to speak to a marijuana industry conference in Las Vegas. There were 3,000 people there. 3,000 people. There was an exhibit hall about 8 times the size of this dining room. There were people now, an industry that is now paying hundreds of millions of dollars in tax revenue, with tax revenue being dedicated for school construction and drug education and law enforcement and things like that. I'm getting calls now from Republican lobbyists and Republican businessmen who always were anti-marijuana, and also, oh, wait, there might be some money in this? And, you know, I think we got a model here. I mean, you know, the casinos have done stuff, and I mean, can we, like, you know, and you know what's happening is you got conservative and religious business people and corporations. I find out that it's one of these major food corporations that, like, inspects the quality of food and does certification. They're now spending money to see what role they're going to play with ganja-infused food products, right? I mean, there is now an industry growing. It's not just the ganja. It's the ways you consume it. It's the vaporizer devices. It's the insurance. It's the transport. It's the banking. It's the expertise. It is all of this whole huge industry that is emerging above ground in the United States with this incredible entrepreneurial power and entrepreneurship that I know also exists in Jamaica. Right? You know what else is happening? These conservative business people who were always anti-marijuana and now all of a sudden the dollars are making them go, hey, well, maybe we should get into this. Once they start looking at the financial opportunities of marijuana, then all of a sudden they start scratching their head and going, why was I against this stuff again? I mean, I know I don't want my kid waking and baking, but I mean, why was I about keeping it illegal? What was that about? And maybe I should try it. There's a rethinking going on, and then they start to pay attention to the extraordinary medical value of marijuana and the growing amount of research around the world, and scientists who have no interest in the politics of this stuff say that cannabis, the plant cannabis and its ingredients could be the most, in fact, is emerging as the most exciting area of neuroscientific research today into the brain and its relationship to the cannabinoid system in the body. And then they're realizing, well, wait a second. I mean, in so many respects, marijuana is less dangerous than alcohol. I mean, there's almost no domestic violence associated with it. You don't have the problems of sexual violence associated with marijuana. You know, driving under the influence, not a good idea, but nothing compared to alcohol. Right? The study just came out. Over the last few months, a whole series of academic scientific studies have come out. Interestingly, they show, please keep it down. Interestingly, they show that in the states that have made marijuana more legally available for medical other purposes, reports of domestic violence are down. Auto accidents are down. And the theory is it's because people are substituting marijuana for alcohol. And remarkably, in the states with the most robust medical marijuana programs, the number of people dying from an overdose involving a pharmaceutical opiate or heroin is down by 30%. Because it turns out that for many people, marijuana can be a more effective substance to deal with pain than is opiates. Or, if you still need to use opiates, you can reduce your consumption of opiates significantly by using ganja because of the synergistic effect between the two of them. I'm not just making this stuff up. I mean, this is the scientific studies coming out. I mean, for those of you who talk about, ganja is it's just our plant. It's our native thing, right? We don't call it a drug. The fact of the matter is, ganja is truly an amazing, amazing plant and substance. The Lancet, the British medical journal, said that marijuana could well emerge as the aspirin of the 21st century. And by that, they didn't mean that it was good for headaches. By that, they meant it would have a remarkable number of valuable medical purposes at a remarkably low cost. So, let me come down to Jamaica now. Here's what I don't know. And here's what worries me, both in my country and yours. When I went to that marijuana industry conference in Las Vegas, most of the people there had no connection to marijuana until a few years ago. They're business people looking to make money. Some of them enjoy it. Very few of them were involved in the struggle. And as time moves on, this marijuana industry in America is going to be more and more divorced from the people who care about marijuana for health reasons, spiritual reasons, personal reasons, and from the movement, the political movement that drove the legalization in the first place. I'm already worrying about what's going to happen to the small family farmers in Humboldt and Mendocino and other places when we move forward to try to legalize it in California in 2016. I'm worried about what's going to happen when more and more this becomes a big industry, because I am not fighting for the Marlboroization or Budweiserization of marijuana. That's not what I'm fighting for. I'm looking for the models about how we do this in the right way so that when ganja eventually does become legalized, that we don't look back on the good old days of prohibition. Because God knows the good old days of drug prohibition are not that good. At best they'll look good in hindsight, but they are not good for the millions of people in my country and the hundreds of thousands of people in your country who have suffered arrest for marijuana. They are not good for what happened to Mario Dean just a few months ago in Kingston. When somebody lands up in a police station, doesn't ever come out alive for one reason or another, and the reason he landed up in that station was because of ganja. It is not good for all the young people getting a criminal record. It is not good for the people who have broken their crops eradicated with U.S.-funded, excursions and such. It is not good when disputes in the ganja business are resolved through violence. It is not good when a society engages in hypocrisy around this issue of ganja. Intergenerational hypocrisy, political hypocrisy, and every other form of hypocrisy. It means that there are all sorts of good reasons to end prohibition of ganja entirely and put it behind us. But the important thing is to do it right. When Ross Ivy, stands up here and says we need to do this in a way and make this legal in a way that respects the rights of people who have been engaged with ganja for decades, that's what needs to happen. When the growers drive across the country from St. Thomas to be here because they're concerned about building a growing movement of the ganja growers so they can exercise some political influence, that's a positive sign. When you, the Negril Chamber of Commerce, invite me to speak and show up in such wonderful numbers, I hope it means because the Negril Chamber of Commerce wants to find out the positive solutions, the way to deal with this stuff. But I see, listen, the market force is extraordinary. The role of business in my country and globally is an enormous force. It can roll over things. The element of greed and desire to grow and get bigger and bigger and bigger, I don't know exactly how to fight it. But I know that there are models out there. I know that when we look at the vineyards, in many parts of the world with family orchards and things like that, and thousands, tens of hundreds of thousands of people running their family, that the idea of having cannabis vineyards, ganja yurts, is something that might make sense. I look at the growth of the microbrewery industry in my country, and I say perhaps there's a model. I look at other cooperative models happening with other products around Latin America and other parts of the world, and I say, there's a model. Here's what Jamaica can provide real leadership. It's in coming up with the models that respect the rights of those people who have been involved with ganja for decades, and of doing it in a way that is also responsible vis-a-vis young people in our society, responsible in terms of keeping people safe. Now, I'll tell you something else. A friend of mine told me they had taken a little of that ganja, given it by a friend from Orange Hill, brought it up to the US, and grown it indoors. And he said, you know that Orange Hill ganja, when you produce it indoors, it's damn good. Damn good. This stuff can compete. This stuff can compete. Right? You got something good here. But I'm going to tell you something else. It's not just about the quality of the ganja. You guys got some good shit here, I know. When people want to understand drugs, it's not just about, when you understand the effect of a drug, it's not just about the drug and what's in it. It's also, there was an expression called drug set and setting. Set is what you think that drug is going to do to you. Setting is the environment and the culture. If you ask why alcohol consumption in Scandinavia and Russia and the parts of the sort of northern hemisphere look radically different from alcohol consumption in southern Europe, which in turn looks radically different from alcohol consumption on Native American reservations, which in turn looks radically different from alcohol consumption on Native American reservations, which are members of the Native American church that use peyote in their ceremonies, which is radically different. You know, you realize, same drug, radically different impacts, right? Now, Jamaica has something special, and Negril has something extra special. Extra special. What people get here is not just a feeling of ease when they use their ganja on vacation and when judges and lawyers and businessmen, everybody feels you can come to Negril and it's chill. And you can do stuff here in a relaxed way, maybe even sitting outside that you can't do back home, depending upon where you live in the U.S. That environment, that specialness of Jamaica, that unique relationship that Jamaica has with ganja and Negril more than anybody else, is something very special that needs to be cultivated. The ways in which you figure out how to integrate ganja into your tourism here, not just because it's friendly and sympathetic and the tourists can get it on the beach or on the street and it's all tolerant and nobody except getting hassled except for a few of the cops being jerks and busting people or something. You know, a more thorough integration where it becomes part of a wellness-oriented tourism industry, where you provide a model for the rest of the world and you lead the world in doing it this way. Right? That's part of what Jamaica can do. But I'll tell you something else. It's not just the quality of the product you provide in terms of both the ganja itself and in terms of the environments here in Negril, Jamaica. It's also how well you market it. Now, you're all in business, you all know about marketing. But one thing I've sometimes been struck by is a level of naivete in Jamaica about how it's all perceived outside. When I tell people I've been coming out of Jamaica over the last few years to talk moving legalized ganja, you know what half the people say to me? I thought it was already legal there. So that's almost not going to be news. What that means is that for Jamaica to put out the message, ganja now legal in Jamaica, people go, really? Oh, I don't know. I mean, what it means is that you're promoting something else. The safe environment, the healthy environment, the place, the atmosphere, there's something special about this. It means that when you think your Jamaica Sensimilla is going to sell itself, you can understand that there's a new form of marketing that needs to go on here, and there needs to be sophisticated thinking about how Jamaica does that. I'll tell you something else. When you eventually move forward, not just with decriminalizing marijuana, allowing the religious and medical use, but when you move forward with setting up a system to legally tax and regulate it, you know what you're going to have to stick in that law? You're going to have to increase penalties on the export of ganja to the U.S. or other countries. Because part of the deal with the U.S. is okay, you can legalize it here, but we don't want to see any increase in exports to our country, even if Colorado, Washington, Oregon, and Alaska are all growing in other countries, blah, blah, blah. Because under federal law, it is still illegal. That's going to be part of the quid pro quo. You may be setting the stage for the day when it is legal nationally in the U.S. and when other countries are legalizing it and you can export it. You may be finding opportunities to legally export it for medical purposes to other places. Although Jamaica is now so far behind on the medical research compared to what's going on in England and Canada and the U.S. that I don't know if you can catch up at this point. And if you want to catch up, you better get in gear, right? But it means that that's the deal that has to happen. Now, here's what I know. There appears to be, as I said before, bipartisan support in this country for moving forward with ganja law reform and with decriminalizing and ultimately legalizing and regulating this substance. That appears to exist. As far as I can tell, there are more politicians of influence in favor of this in both parties now than opposed. So far as I can tell, your Prime Minister and a lot of the other key ministers and the key leaders in the JLP support this direction over the opposition and concern of what key religious leaders objecting to it in a knee-jerk sort of way, certain elected officials objecting to it in a knee-jerk sort of way. Long time ago, there's a story that, I don't know if it was labor leaders or African American leaders or civil rights leaders go to see Franklin Delano Roosevelt in the 30s. And they're saying to him, Mr. President, we want you to move forward on our agenda. Come on, you said you would. We're going to move forward on labor rights, civil rights, whatever it was. And you know what FDR said to them? Make me do it. What did he mean? He meant, I'm dealing with a whole panoply of political forces, and I need the pressure coming from you if I'm going to do this. I need the pressure from you to outpower the pressure from the other side. Well, a lot's happened in Jamaica in the last year. The growers associations, and you guys here, and others, and political leadership, the media. I don't think with the daily leaders writing about this compared to 10 years ago, come a long way. Long way. But that means the pressure's got to be real. It's got to be forceful. It's got to be organized. Do not wait. Do not stand on Jamaica time when you want to move forward. Do not think the world is going to wait for you. Because I'm telling you, if you don't move, you will be importing ganja from America 10 years from now. And you do not want to do that. I'm finishing on those words. Get going, Jamaica. Get going, Negril. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, I always say, when there is something good, when we have something good, we must let it be known. Ladies and gentlemen, I've heard that Orange Hill is known for good stuff, and you know, you can come here. So ladies and gentlemen, we cannot import something that is so special to us. We have it. We can make the best of it. Ladies and gentlemen, I've seen it on many occasions that if we were to legalize a great product, not just for medicinal purposes, but it would reduce harassment on the beach. It would allow a comfortable movement of people around in Negril, not worrying about the authorities on our backs. Ladies and gentlemen, we have great things coming. And with what you have presented today, we hope that as business people in Negril, we take this into consideration. Let's move forward and take Negril back to how it should be. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. A round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, for a wonderful presentation.
Instead of taking questions from you all now, I will stay as long as you want here to answer your questions. I brought some booklets with me, the booklets that we hand out with the California Parents Teachers Association about how to address the issue of adolescence and drugs. So any way that my organization, the Drug Policy Alliance, can help, I'm very proud. My colleague here, the late Burnett, who was born in Jamaica, grew up in the U.S., and led the effort for decriminalization in D.C. We will do everything we can to help advance the process. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ethan. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to invite onto center stage right now Mr. Winthrop Wellington from Travelers to give us the vote of thanks. But before we do that, ladies and gentlemen, just to remind you once again that we do have a few more minutes left. I would say 20 minutes or 50 minutes left on the auction. So please go out and bid. Mr. Wellington, please make your way on center stage.
All right, good evening, everyone. I promise I will not take 15 minutes to do this. My name is Winthrop Wellington. As Patrick said, I am a board member of the Negril Chamber of Commerce, and I'm also the area chairman for the Jamaica Hotel and Tourist Association. And this evening, it is my distinct honor and pleasure to give the vote of thanks for this wonderful event that we had this evening. So, first of all, I want to thank all of you for attending and supporting this event. Without you, this would not be possible. So once again, thank you all for attending and supporting the Negril Chamber of Commerce and this fundraising effort. And we'd like to thank Mr. Nadelman for his wonderful speech that he just gave before us. It was very informative in many, many ways. And also thank his team for flying over from the United States and joining us and supporting our event as well. We would like to thank the Negril Hemp Association. They're the ones who opened up this evening's event after Patrick introduced them. And then, of course, this event could not be possible without the many, many sponsors. So it's very important that I go through those individually. The first people I would like to thank is Mr. and Mrs. Issa for this wonderful venue they provided for us. Thank you guys very, very much. We'd like to thank the staff that swept away. The chef, the food was absolutely delicious. The service was fantastic. And so we'd like to thank CPJ, Select Brands, and Gray's Foods for donating the wines and alcohol. Coldfield Manufacturing for pure juices. Wasinko Limited, Floral Fantasy for all the centerpieces that you see on the tables here. They donated to them for this evening's event. We'd like to thank all the media houses for covering the function. We'd like to thank all the hotels for providing housing for the media. Hedonism, Negril Tree House, Rayon Hotel, Travelers Beach Resort, Shirella Inn, Idle a While, and Couples Negril. We'd also like to thank Patrick Watt, for emceeing this event tonight. There he is. Thank you very much. You did a wonderful job this evening, Patrick. And we have a bunch of people to thank for the silent auction. Let me go through it. We have about 30 items that we have there. So we have a weekend for two from Idlewild, a weekend for two from Couples, private dinner at the Caves, Rock House for their spa treatment, the Gene Pearson Mask, a dinner for two with Shirella Inn, the Grand Palladium for their day passes, YS4 for 6 admissions to their venue. We had 2 3-month Express Fitness memberships, an all-inclusive night pass at Italian Cafe, 4 all-inclusive night passes at the Jungle, the spa retreat for a half-day facial massage and body scrub, the spa retreat restaurant. They gave 3 $100 gift certificates for their restaurant, a 2-night stay as well, and a 3-night stay, 4-day passes from Missoula Centauri, a 1-month gym membership at Couples Swept Away, Dolphin Cove 2 Ultimate Swims, a weekend at 4 Seasons, including breakfast, golf package from Try All, Tucker Adventure, Dolphin Cove, Grace Kennedy for their ham, signature dinner at Hungry Lion, Christmas cake from Donette, a weekend stay at Round Hill, and Negril for his almond oil and the gift basket that he's donated. And last but not least, we have Inter-Caribbean for a 2 round-trip plane tickets from Montego Bay to Kingston or Kingston to Montego Bay. And those are all the silent auction items, so please give them a round of applause for And last but not least, I want to thank the organizing body of this, the board of directors of the Negril Chamber of Commerce. A lot of hard work and effort went into putting this together, so please give them a round of applause for doing this evening. And before I close, I'd like to invite Ms. Jackson up to make a special presentation. Please give her a warm welcome. Okay, I'm going to ask Mr. Naderman to come up, please. Okay, well, we, on behalf of the Negril Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors, we'd like to present you with this 21-year-old Appleton Estate Appleton.
I just want to say, it's wonderful because I've received so many presents of ganja that I can't take home. This I can take home.
Once again, on behalf of the Negril Chamber of Commerce, I'd like to thank everyone for attending this evening's event, and have a good evening and get home safely. Thank you once again.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Winthrop Wellington from Travelers. Now, ladies and gentlemen, of course, just to let you know that we still have the bidding taking place outside our silent auction. So please, make your way out, support a great cause, the Negril Chamber of Commerce reinventing themselves tonight. So it's a new move. So if you have not taken a look at the silent auction, please make way over and we will announce the winner of the various prizes. So stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen. Sit back, relax, have a wonderful evening.